Should we start? Zoe?
What?
Do you want to say something?
It's not gone live on me yet, that's why.
It very much is for all of us.
Wonderful. Well, good evening, he, she's, theys and gays. Welcome to the first Queer Confab, where we're discussing labels. That's great. I'm just seeing everything that's actually happened so far. I love my concentrating face, by the way. Today we are discussing labels. What are labels? Are they important? We are discussing them in terms of gender identity and sexual orientation, because you can label food, and that's just not what we're here for today. What are they in relation to these things? Are they helpful indicators in finding one's identity, or are they a negative classification that perpetuates stereotypes? Today we have a wonderful array of guests. I'm going to get them all to introduce themselves, and while introducing yourselves, I would also like you to tell us, the viewers, what is your definition of a label? So we'll start with Mr. Sargent.
Me? No. Hello, I'm Tom Sargent. Do you know, it's so long since I've said my full name. That felt really weird. I just feel like I'm on the school register. That's wonderful. Great. Yeah, so I'm Tom. To me, labels are identifiers that sometimes identify you in a positive or negative light. And I guess that's what we're going to talk about. That was vague, but that's my answer.
Fantastic. Next one, in you go. Just someone talk.
Oh wow, hi. I'm Nea Cornér. I guess we're going with the full name. They, she pronouns, and labels are, I don't know. I didn't think about this. I probably should have, because it's the topic. Let's just say I've had a very complicated relationship with them, and we'll see how it further develops during this chat.
Perfect. Sammy, your turn.
Okay, shit. Hi, I'm Sammy Bacon. I'm going last, so I've had the most time to think, and I still can't think of a good answer. Labels are things that we use to identify ourselves, but also things that are ascribed to us by other people, and we can either feel like we identify with that or not. Yeah.
Girl.
Hello.
Hello.
It's like, I can't think of a good answer, but here's a really good one.
Here's like
I'm just trying to be humble.
Dictionary. Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, it's great for you, all you guys to be here. I'm Zoe. I'm your host for this evening. And for once, I won't be giving my opinion about shit, which is great. So we're going to dive right into it. I'm going to start us off kind of general, and I just want to know how, do you guys believe that labels are important in today's society? Sammy, I'll start with you since you went last and you don't get as much time to think this time.
I think so. I think people like to have things that they feel like they can be a part of and represent themselves. No, I don't think they're inherently a bad thing. I don't think they're inherently a good thing either. I think it just depends how they're used, and yeah, I think
Okay, Nia?
Yeah, I think it's like, if you can find a label that fits you, or if you can see a group of people that seem to like act in a similar way, or like talk about stuff that you also feel, in that sense, yes. I mean, obviously, if you can talk about stuff and relate to that without a label, but if it has a name, maybe it's also easier to relate to other people with that. So like, say, oh, I am bisexual, or whatever it might be, and then people understand what it means because you've got that simple word for it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. What everyone said, but I guess, like, I think labels have such a specific connotation to them. I feel like they're really boxed. And I think, using bisexual as an example, since you mentioned it, I think people have a perception of like that thing based on what the label is. So I think even though it's great to have an identifier, I feel like that's a label. It's a label for me, not a label for you, is sort of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, but I think that's also like how, rather than the label being necessarily a bad thing, it's how people see it.
Right.
I don't know.
That segues greatly onto my next question, which is, so we've established the importance of labels, if there is or if there isn't. What do you think are the empowering things about having labels, and what do you think might be limiting about them? So going into more detail about what we were just kind of discussing. I've got some points here that I can kind of fire out so you can go from there. Having labels, it counters ambiguity. Sometimes it helps understanding of those who don't understand other labels. It gives, a person the ability to find their people, that kind of thing. Or it can also open up discrimination and ways to nitpick at things, and who decides on the criteria of certain labels. And if you don't quite fit that criteria, who are you? Those kind of things. Anyone want to jump in with that?
I think it's interesting. I've been thinking about this because I've been trying to think. I need to sound, like I know I'm talking about on what day is it? Sunday. It's weird. Like, we live in a world, unfortunately, that is very violent and volatile, and queer people need labels because we need things to feel attached to, because we don't feel attached to the cis heteronormative straight world. Of course, in a egalitarian, like utopian society, we wouldn't need labels because people would just be whatever they would like to be. But we need labels. But we were saying, it touched on it earlier, it's when a label is weaponized and used as a tool to demonize someone or discriminate against someone. But I also think it's interesting, especially in the queer community, because you take yourself out of the box that is the straight world and you put yourself in the box that is the queer world, and people have a very fixed idea of what a gay man is or what a lesbian is, and that can be very difficult. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this.
You're going great.
Someone
And like,
tag in, Tom.
no, I fully get that, because like I myself like I had quite a long queer journey, if you can say that. It's a lifelong journey anyway. And I think part of it was because I was like, I don't want to label myself, because then that means I'm only one thing and I'm not one thing. But that's, or like, if I say I'm something, then I need to be that version of that something, wherein like everyone's an individual anyway, so there's not one version of a gay man or a lesbian or a gender fluid person. But in the empowering sense, I feel like, at least for myself, when I found a word that was like, oh, actually that makes sense for me, and then it becomes easier to explain to others as well, if you can use a word that sort of, like gender fluid, which is how I identify. It, like, people understand those two words. Maybe they don't understand it as a concept, but at least it can kind of bring them more easily into it.
Yeah, I think it's that thing, isn't it? It's the kind of what Sammy was saying, that it's nice to have a label, and you have to shout about that label sometimes when those labels are like oppressed, because otherwise other people can't find those labels and feel comfortable in them. But then I guess the flip side of it, which is sort of almost what you're talking about, Naya, is like, as soon as you're like, oh, let's stick this label on, it's really hard to sort of take it off, because it stops you from being able to explore, because it's like, well, this label says this, it doesn't say this, and maybe I want to try this a little bit. Or yeah, I think we all have quite a damaged relationship to labels in a way, don't we? Because I think we all maybe strive to find who we are in life, and I think sometimes that journey to finding who we are, which, as you've just said, Naya, is lifelong, I think sometimes is really, really difficult when you have to keep labeling it along the way. Yeah, so I don't know, it's hard, because sometimes you do find the label that fits, as you said, Naya, but it doesn't mean that has to stick for eternity. And yeah, I don't know.
That's what I was thinking of. We started talking about that. I was like, labels evolve, and a label you feel an affinity for when you're 18 might completely change when you're 20. It might change the next week. And I think people get very annoyed for some reason, like, oh, but last week you said you identified as this, or you would describe yourself like this. And I think, as I said, like, the queer journey is a lifetime, and you know, we all might have a label right now that we hold to, and in 3 years we're like, oh wait, no, that's not really me anymore. And I think people are always very resistant to the idea that people can change, and sometimes something just doesn't fit you anymore.
Yeah, because like I think is also, especially within the queer community, your label is also your identity. So then if you find that it's changing somehow, say if you've always say like you've only fancied the opposite sex, and then suddenly like, well, that's not maybe great, because like then you just thought you were hetero. Anyway, let's flip it the other way around. So you thought you only fancy the same sex, and then suddenly you're like, no, actually this opposite sex person, I'm like really attracted to them. What's happening? But I'm gay. Like, so then that can just,
You were completely on the right track with that thinking you were heterosexual for all your life, because that happened to me in the last couple of the last year, didn't it, Tom? The last year I was very much convinced that I was fully straight, like, but I've always been attracted to anyone. I've always been fine being attracted to lots of different people, but I seem to like switch out being sexually attracted and being emotionally attracted. So I'm a heteroromantic pansexual, is what I've been told.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
totally
Labels.
right. I just came out on YouTube. Woohoo! Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Like, everything you were speaking about made me think. So earlier when I was looking into this, I was like researching and stuff like that. And I looked up the definition of labels, and here it says a classifying phrase or name applied to a person or a thing, especially one that is inaccurate or restrictive. And I feel like that applies a lot in some of the things you guys have been saying, like how labels can be great, but then there's sometimes, maybe there's a bit of limitation in them and trying to fit in with them. So that's really great, and it's interesting. It just popped into my mind there. We'll move on to the next one. So I would like to know something more personal about each of you. I would like to know, when did you know what labels you began fitting into? Like at what age, roundabout? If you could tell me a little bit of a story, even if it's just one label that you identify with. How did you come to feel that? If you don't feel comfortable answering that question, that's totally fine. But does anyone want to go forward with that first?
Yeah. Sorry,
okay.
I'm coming off mute because my flatmate has the washing machine on. So apologies if that's in the background.
Fuck's sake, Brian.
Yeah, you can just at him. I mean, for me, I feel like I've never been uncomfortable in my sexuality specifically. I've just sort of always known, if you will. And I think perhaps telling other people that it's like, this is that label is been maybe the harder thing, because I don't care what they think in terms of what I do sexually, because I think unless I'm a particular oversharer, which I guess I can be, but all of you were just like, yeah. I don't think it really matters, because I think most of my pals over my life are just like, well, that's just you, that's just who you are. So that wasn't really a helpful answer, but I guess certainly around that like 10 to 12 region, I remember like actively thinking about what I was attracted to and being like, oh, sorry, this is graphic. I remember sitting in the bathtub and like hanging onto my boob like this, and like with my genitals in the other hand, and being like, well, there's one of those that just I find much more better. Much more better. Great English, Tom. So anyway, that was the answer to your question.
You just talk about oversharing, and then you say that.
I feel like if you were trying to describe Tom to somebody, you could just show them that clip and be like, that's Tom. There you go. That's how
That's the clip you should make it just short for Instagram. That one.
Like that, we'll get chucked off Instagram for that.
That's the most you thing you've ever said. That was brilliant.
Well, I think it's true though, isn't it? We're talking about exploring sexuality and gender. It sometimes is just nitty gritty and dirty, and it sometimes is just exploring. And
Clearly.
feeling yourself, literally. And yeah, I don't know. I think when you're younger, sometimes that's really hard to do. So I don't know about other people. I think other people have come and explored much later in life, right?
Yeah, that's definitely me. I feel like, well, I made like a official coming out post only like end of last year, but I even called it like not coming out, but like settling in or something. Because like I've known, and I know that like I told my mum, I text her separately because like she's got me on Instagram, and I was like, just to let you know, it's not that I haven't wanted to tell you, but I just haven't had the words myself. So yeah, but for me, like the moment when I like fully maybe like found, well, I found the label, I guess, like all like Instagram just started to give me like queer content, and then but like May Martin was the moment when I was like, I don't like, I'm attracted to them, but also I want to be them. And then they said something in one of their um stand up you know sets, what are they called, that like I was like, oh, that really, I understand how you feel, and it was something to do with gender. It's, they've got so many good things about it. One of them is like, oh, I actually feel like a corn on the cob. That wasn't the one I identified with, but yeah, so it was literally like someone else, hearing someone else say something, and I was like, oh, that clicks. And then I realized I'd had it like recurring in my life previously, that I have thought about gender, but I just didn't have the words for it before. Yeah, I don't know.
Wonderful.
Sorry,
Last
sorry.
time? Oh,
I also just feel like they are such, I mean, we lumber them together, but like I exploring gender and sexuality feel like such different worlds.
Mm.
And I think that's so much for people to expect everyone to do before they're like 18 or like 16.
Mm.
And I think it's great that that in the UK and other places that there is a more open, but not amazingly open still, but a more open way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just feel like we should acknowledge that I think one is much harder to do still than the other.
And also it's much like sexuality, it's much more out in the open than like the differences in gender. Like it, like even if you were against homosexuals or whatever, you still know what it means. But if someone says like, oh yeah, there's gender is a spectrum, you can still be like, what that? So I don't know. Like
Sorry to
even
interrupt
within
you, Sammy.
even within the
No, it's fine.
community.
It's fine. You give me even more time.
Yeah, like think about your answer.
Yeah, mine's been a much longer, slower journey. I only came out to my parents last year, and they just didn't give a shit, which was obviously the reaction you want. It wasn't like maybe it was like a subconscious fear thing. It was more like I think I'll be fine with it, but I need to get comfortable with this first. But you get comfortable with different, like you get comfortable with different times and at different points and with different people. So I think maybe I always sort of knew that there was a something. I just didn't know what the something was. And then I was like 18 and I was like, hold on now. I remember there was this guy, he was in my A-level drama class, and I was like, that's a good looking man. That's a very good looking man. We haven't talked about this. And then, and then yeah. So things happened, and then you're like, oh, guys are nice. And then yeah, and then I don't know, yeah, and then so yeah, I was like 19. I think I told my friends on holiday, oh yeah, I'm bisexual, whatever. So yeah, it's been a much slower journey, but also I'm fine with that now. Like I really am cool with that. So yeah.
But then it's interesting. We've all just like literally stuck a label on ourselves there in that conversation.
That's true.
And I don't know, was that a good thing?
Well, I don't know, because I've been thinking about this recently, maybe over the past like 6 months or so, that like maybe even bisexual doesn't fit me anymore. Like I would have no problems dating someone who's not binary. So again, that's an example of like how labels change and you figure out more and you're like, oh wait, okay, maybe that doesn't fit me anymore. But at the time, maybe bisexual was a simpler thing to understand and a more like, I don't know I don't know how to word it. Not like a starter pack, but like I don't know. Just like that's a really bad thing to say. But you know what? Just like
and also because there's nuances to the labels. Because I know like friends who identify as bi, and then I'm like, well, okay, well, would you not be attracted to a non-binary person? But then like bisexuality doesn't necessarily mean you're attracted to two genders. It can mean you're attracted to two or more. So yeah.
But it's funny because like as a label, I still I hear the word bi and think two, because that's
that's
right?
what it means.
Indeed. So like I think, I don't know, pansexual is obviously a much more inclusive term, but when people are talking about their own sexuality, why do they have to be inclusive? They like what they like. So yeah, I don't know.
Interesting. You guys have brought up a number of points that I wanted to discuss in next discussion points that I have written on my iPad. So that's great. The first one I would kind of like to touch on is, we kind of brought it up slightly, was the difference between how people treat sexuality label and a gender label. We did kind of start discussing it there. What do you guys think people find easier? Do you think there is a difference? Which we were kind of getting along lines. I'd like to touch on that point again, if people would be happy to go more into depth with that.
Yeah,
I feel like it would be, Naya, you got to start.
Yeah, it's like I'll speak. Yeah, like I was kind of saying earlier, it's sexuality seems a more simple thing to explain and to understand than gender, and like I think that's also why it took me a long time to like understand myself, because feelings are weird and like identity is a strange thing. So then like if I say to someone like, oh yeah, I'm gender fluid, and they're like, but what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I just sometimes feel like this and sometimes I feel like this. So I guess in that sense, like it's much easier to label your sexuality, to just be like, oh yeah, I'm pansexual, which means that I am attracted to these kind of people. Whereas like, I don't know, my gender is neither here nor there, and I don't know what it is. I'm just swimming in a pool of
Labels tend to confuse people, and I think gender fluidity and sexual fluidity is almost like a limbo, because there's not like an absolute for it, so there's not like an absolute explanation, and that seems to terrify people. And I do feel I find that these are newer labels, and the newer you get, the more people are like, no, stay away, kind of thing. So yeah, that's really interesting. It's a really interesting point. Does anyone else want to touch up on that?
It's funny. You just said touch up, and that's funny. And B, Naya, I love that you were just like, I'm just sort of like swimming around in my own gender fluid. It's just that's so funny. I don't think that they are new labels. I feel like I disagree with you, Zoe. I think they're
newer termed one.
Newer terms. I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're new. They've always existed, but the newer coined terms for things tend to be scarier.
Right, that's it, because things come in and out of fashion. But also I think that's the point I want to make, is that they change because they start to have negative connotations, perhaps. I'm not saying they all did, but it's like, I think there's such specific connotations to wanting to explore your gender, because we're so fixed on the idea now that there are one and two and that's it. And I think everyone should be able to explore that, because how will you ever know yourself if you ain't gonna feel a boob in a bath? Like I will stop using that example, but like I genuinely though, I feel like I've tried to explore my gender and I'm still in the same place I was. because that's where I am, and that's fine. But I think that's a harder thing to admit, to be like, oh yeah, I went home and was like, what would it be to not be a bloke tonight? And I was like, oh, I quite like being a bloke. And even the word bloke, curl, I'm not a bloke.
But
What
then
do you
is
mean,
that
Tom? You're so
label?
bloke.
Yeah,
Top
I'm
bloke,
really
thank you.
woke.
Top bloke.
I don't know, Sammy,
Yeah.
what about you?
Yeah, no, I've never really had a moment, as far as I can remember, where I've been like, oh, maybe I'm not a man. It's always been like, oh no, I feel like man fits me and I'm happy with that. It's more getting into like the what is expected of a man, both in like the stereotypical straight heteronormative man world, but also like in the gay world, like what's expected of like a gay man. Like I was saying some the other day, I've never really felt like I find a connection. I think it's amazing, like the whole like girl like boom shit a cat stuff. Like I think it's great.
Do it
I think
again, do it again.
what an I think it's amazing, and it's fantastic that people do that to express themselves. But on a personal level, I've never been like, oh, that's how I identify as a queer person. So I think that's been more the not struggle, because that's a bit like over dramatic, but I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, no, yeah, I think people should just explore their gender and just like let people do what they want. Like, what are
Yeah,
we doing?
Let people live.
Come on. Yeah, like who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
literally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. We
Yeah.
had, when we did Dangerous Dialogues, which is sort of this in a slightly different form, last year for Pride Month, there was actually, this may be 2 years ago. I have no concept of time. Time is a construct like gender and everything else. Anyway, whenever it was, we had this really, really fantastic drag queen on called Bev. And they were, I like Zoe, you remember because you were there. But they went through this process during our dialogues in Pride Month, where they won't mind me saying, because it's there and they talked about it in these dialogues, that they changed their pronouns as it went, because it became clear that as people called them, that just felt more comfortable. So it was like, it was mad that, but that was a journey they were going on anyway. Aside of this, but it's sort of mad that things like that have to happen sometimes on such a public platform. Like people have to actively accept you for you to suddenly feel like you're you. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's a funny one, gender, because I feel like that there's much more fixed ideas of that than there is of sexuality. And I applaud anyone that is sort of outwardly being them, that's beyond that sort of binary, conventional binary, let's say that, because it's hard. And that's why I think labels are good in that sense. You've got to be loud.
Yeah, love that. So just hypothetically, you know, like philosophically, if the gender ideals didn't exist for male and female, you know, like girls like pink, boys like blue, etc., do you think there would be any need for the spectrum of genders that there is, like, you know, because that's what we're trying to stray away from, is the whole what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a gay. Like, if we didn't have those,
Okay.
do you think we would need everything else?
It's really interesting, because I was talking about this with someone, and they were like, "Oh yeah, if we didn't have a set structure for gender, trans people wouldn't exist." I'm like, I don't know that I agree with that. Like, it might be true, but also like, if people still had different bodies, then it might, like, it's just the like societal expectations and constructs are still separate from the, you know, way people look. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think we just classify things in a different way.
Yes.
And because it's sexuality is a good example of that, where we're like, well, these are the sexualities, like LGBT or whatever, and there's the whole alphabet. But like now we every year we add on a couple more letters, because there's more things that have been explored, and that's great. But that's the point. We keep trying to identify the thing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like gender would be like that, probably.
We need to put a label on something to make it make sense, so it's not as scary.
Yeah, because that's how like life and society works anyway. Like you have words and you have meanings for things so that you understand them. So
Hmm.
if it was just like I mean, obviously, like yeah, set like roles and things are not great because then if you go against them, you're a weirdo. But yeah, so in that sense, like I guess that the label of sorts is good.
It has its purpose.
Yeah.
For sure. Another point I want to make from that conversation, we were talking. We were talking about like kind of the ages we were finding things out and realizing. Do you think there should be a limit to the age that people start exploring these gender and sexual identities? You know, like is there too young? Is there too old? Is there any? You know, do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Um, I think in terms of gender stuff, I think no, because I think you shouldn't have this idea that like, oh, that's a girl, I'm going to get them the pink blanket for when they're born, and the boy's going to get the blue blanket. There should be a lot more. I mean, I don't know how much like, autonomy a baby can have by what they wear, but you can at least try your best, or at least go for a more neutral like approach. And then the older they get and the more self-aware they get, then they can make that choice. And I feel like maybe that would be an easier thing for people to change their minds about, rather than like exploring yourself like sexually or whatever. I think that would be a very big like, oh my god, no, you can't. I think that would be a lot more uproar. Um, yeah, I think it's just those like very traditional conservative with a small c like views of like, this is what a boy dresses like and this is what a girl dresses like. I think that would be an easier thing to change, perhaps. I think.
And like definitely, I don't think there's an upper limit for exploring anything. Definitely not.
No.
But and it's like it's in a way it's I mean it's great, but it's also a bit sad that someone only truly finds and is able to bravely be themselves when they're much older. But then if they can live their full life, then that's cool. As for like the younger people, I understand where people's concern comes from, especially if it's like, oh, there's a 5-year-old who says that they're not the gender that they're assigned to be. What can we do? Like maybe don't start like hormone therapy at that age, but like just maybe let them be and see what happens, and don't put your own ideas of things on the child.
But then I sort of wonder that for like that lower age range, why do we even change the way that we raise a child based on their gender for those first like maybe even 5 years? Because certainly when you're in like reception or primary one, depending what country you are and what you call it, look at me being inclusive. It doesn't. It's the same toilet. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same education. It's there's actually very little to how you would teach like a 0 to 5-year-old about how to be. So by that point, by the time you're 5, you can make really little decisions. You can go, well, that's the thing I want to wear. That's the thing I want to be today. And it really doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a more appropriate way, because then you don't have 70-year-olds being like, actually, all my life I've been trying to live as something that I'm not, and I've never felt comfortable to do it, because you've not told them from childhood that like, this is what you are. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I've been trying to think of this like in nursery and stuff, if we had like separate corners for like, oh, this is where the girls play and this is where the boys, like this is the toys you have. I can't remember, so it's not a very helpful observation. But yeah, because kids don't care themselves. You can tell them anything and they'll just take it for granted. So yeah, it's annoying that adults are like, oh no, but you need to do this because that is how. Yeah.
Can anyone remember like what age it was that they started having to be split by gender in terms of education? I honestly can't even think what it was.
We had PE separately, I think, from from like when I started school at 7. So yeah.
Yeah. We had PE, and I think in year 6 we might have had sex ed differently.
We were in the same.
no.
Yeah, no,
Or
Luke.
maybe there was like, no, I was trying to think. I think maybe there was like one sex ed lesson that was about like periods and stuff like that. And they're like, right, well, the boys can leave. And you're like, and like at the time, you're like, I don't know.
The men don't fucking know anything about periods. Give them the period.
This is the thing. This is the thing. Like,
Yeah.
you know that like that whole thing's just like crazy. That
Yeah.
So that's all I can remember. Definitely PE was split up, but then you have the whole like. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just like trying to think. Like, I think we were in the same class still when we went through, but maybe it was still like, oh, well, this concerns the boys and this concerns the girls. So, but we were
Right.
still, I don't know.
Which is just such an awful way to teach it, because you can't like just like men learning that, or women have periods. It's just like, just trying to teach some basic compassion, and
Yeah.
like this is something that's like really fucking hard, and you should know about it. Because was it just like, why shouldn't like, I just don't get it. It's just crazy to me.
Because aside from like toilets, I can't think of being split up
Oh, toilets
almost
too.
ever. Generally in education, and I know so many schools now, like new build schools, have a lot of sort of gender neutral toilets, and it's only when it comes to changing rooms that things are split, which
Yeah.
fair enough. But yeah, no, sorry, just a thought.
No, it's fine. I mean, you get the unintentional or maybe subconsciously intentional splits in terms of like subject choices, like men doing a lot more like STEM kind of stuff. But I think that's a lot more like socially ingrained, like, well, these are the lady subjects and these are the man subjects. So only a man can do maths. I as a man can say I cannot fucking do maths to save my life.
But
So yeah.
this is interesting now. When do you actually get a choice at some point?
Yeah, we get choice.
Yeah, you get choices, GCSEs and A levels. Yeah.
Oh no, go on.
Well,
because in Finland, like, definitely, like, even up until like university is the place where you choose what you want to do. But I mean, you can go either to like sixth form, I guess, so like high school, or you can go to a vocational school. So then you can choose. But like, if you go to high school, you'll have the same subjects for everyone. You can choose to do a language that the other people are not doing, or you can choose to do a bit more music if you're in like a music school, whatever. But other than that, like, everyone studies the same, or you can choose to do extra stuff, but everyone has to do the same amount of like basic, STEM subjects or languages or whatever. So you don't get a choice. You can't be like, oh, I will not study any physics. No, to hell with that. So
Wow.
yeah, you have to do science until you're 16, and then like most people, when they've done that final science GCSE, are like, well, fuck this, because each their own. It's not my bag.
Yeah.
But I think they're trying to extend it now, and you're going to have to do maths until you're 18 as well now, which is just like, if someone's going to stop doing maths after they're 16, why would that change when they're 18? That 2 years isn't them going to be like, eureka, I get it and I love it now. And you get 3 GCSE choices, but I think it's even more restrictive now. Like, I think I was talking to a young person who's at one of the places I work at, and they were like, I think you can only choose one humanity. For the humanities you don't know, that's like geography, sociology, history, all that kind of stuff, and one art form. So whether that be drama, music, or like art, like, which is just wild to me. Like, what if someone's brain can only learn through the way art teaches? Why are you like just completely holding them back by saying, no, you only get to do one of those things, you have to do all this other stuff that you don't learn from? It doesn't help you because we don't teach it in a way that helps you.
Right.
So I just think choice is getting even more restricted, which is horrible.
Sorry, we went off on one there, Zoe.
It has to do with labels, but
Hey, school is the secondary agent of socialization. It comes into the factors when it comes to gender identity and sexual orientation. School and your school peers does have a lot, so it's kind of on topic, and it's about making a choice about what you like and who you are as well when you pick your subject. So kind of related.
This is why you're the host. You just
I'll find a place.
back together.
Speaking of choices and the amount of things you can choose from, do we think that there are too many labels nowadays? When I was researching, I found that there are now 107 gender identities, and I say choosing. It's not. It's who you are. It's not a choice. It's who you believe you are. 107 different gender identities, according to sexualdiversity.org, as of the 22nd of May, 2023, and there are 47 sexual orientations, according to Healthline. Is this too many, or is this just the criteria didn't really fit me, so now there's this other one that kind of relates to that, but it's this, and this is who I am? What do we think about that?
I wonder if, like, say for example with the sexuality, is that including, say, like, you can be pansexual and demisexual, but those are two different labels, but they can exist together. So, you know, then that obviously brings in more of the labels. It sounds like a lot. That's like 107 gender identities. I mean,
It does sound like a lot. Sorry.
No, you keep going. I'm just looking for my references.
I was going to say, it does sound like a lot, but it's something Tom said earlier. It's like we're always exploring and we're always evolving. And I think the bottom line point that I think I want to make is just I think people should just describe themselves in whatever way they think suits them. And where a lot of discrimination comes from is when you say to someone, "Oh, I'm this," and they go, "Oh, but that's confusing and I don't understand." And it's like, well, try to. Then that's like that. Like, your confusion and your ignorance is not my problem. I mean, it affects my life. But
it does, doesn't it? That's the point. It's like it isn't your problem to teach people those things.
No.
But if they don't know them, who are they going to learn them from? Because it's not always so easy to go and Google what is a demi-pansexual non-binary, blah 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 blah. You know, it's like because that'll send them a million places. Because that's 3 different labels in one there. I don't think.
No, I actually agree with that. It's when someone uses their confusion or lack of knowledge as a tool of discrimination. Someone could not know something. Like 100%, there'll be loads of like gender identities out there that I do not understand, and I'll hold my hands up and say I do not understand. But as long as you actively try to be like, right, I don't get this, but I need to try.
Yeah, or like at least like accept it. Like, okay,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense to me,
that's great.
But it's who you are.
And that's the thing I think that's used a lot in going back to schooling, like sex education, gender identity talks in school, is that it's a lot of fear of parents because there's been so much change in the past few decades. They're like, "Oh, but I don't get this, and this makes me feel unsafe, and it makes me worried, so it's scary and it's dangerous, and I don't want it, and I don't like it, and I'm not going to try." So no, there aren't too many. Just let people themselves what they want. Circle back.
But then I think it's so interesting what you're saying there. And this is literally, I can't think of a single fucking one of these like podcast things that we've done that we don't talk about education in. But I distinctly remember at school, sex ed was like, here's how the pee-pee goes into the vajayjay, and this is how babies are made. And I appreciate like the generation above us in the UK at least had Section 28, so that was it. That was sex ed. That's it. That's the only way to do it, making a baby. And for, I guess, my generation, because I'm old, we all right, fuck off, Zoe, you're not much younger than me.
I feel attacked now.
Oh, because you're actually, oh no, I'm so sorry.
I'm a year younger than you, like.
Anyway, I certainly, our education didn't really include anything beyond sort of even like penetrative heterosexual sex. So I think then that's the normalized thing of like, that is sex, is like making a baby, or just a man and a woman, or at least someone that has a penis and a vagina having sex. Well, I feel like if it was something that was introduced to us at sex ed in that sort of year 6 or primary 7 age, it's like, actually it would be less discriminatory, and would we already understand more because we've been taught it as part of it. That was a very long way to make a really small point, but yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I wonder if that's also yeah, and like I wonder if that's something to so many people speaking, something to do with like you know, okay, they're still kids, so maybe we don't want to get into sex too much. So this is like what it's for, so that's easy. We wrapped it up. Bye. So then if you start to talk about sex in a way that's not about conceiving, then it's about something else, and it's like we don't want to get into that because they're too young.
It makes it almost dirty in a way.
Yes, yeah.
But then sex is dirty.
Well,
I'm
it
not saying
depends
it is
how you like
literally.
it.
I mean, it can be, but you make sex dirty because you think it's something that's dirty. You pack it away in a box.
Yeah,
And that's
I
why
mean,
people get scared of it, right?
yeah, because we're constantly taught that you were meant to be virtuous until marriage, etc. So from those ideals, but yeah, on you go, Sammy.
I remember the only time that we ever really heard about gay sex at school was when it was also talked about with AIDS. It was never like, hey, two men or two women can have sex together and it can be beautiful and it can be amazing. It was like, if two dudes have sex and it's unprotected, they're going to get AIDS. It's going to be awful. And it's that like almost, it's like fear mongering of like, yeah, gay people having sex is dangerous because this happens and it's just really unhelpful. I was just gonna add, that was just like a little footnote to Tom's point about sex ed. Which is
like the Mean Girls coach. You will get pregnant and die.
yeah, and it's just
I'm so fucking grateful that you gave us the quote because all of us were like, we've seen it.
It's like
yes.
That's the ex-straight girl in me. Sorry.
Ex-straight girl.
Oh, fantastic. Is anything else anyone wants to add on that point at all?
I think just that we were talking about the negative connotations of a label. I think they start at that age because you make them negative by not acknowledging them. And like an absolute base, right? You don't even need to teach it. You just need to say it exists and that's fine. And I just feel like that would entirely change an entire generation's perspective on a million things.
Because now that I think of it, like even if people didn't really understand it and it wasn't talked about, or probably especially because of that, like gay or the F word is used a lot as an insult. If you just say it. I mean, there's other words as well that kids use that they don't know what they mean, but like, so if that is the context that you hear it, whether you are gay or not, then you get that negative connotation of it. So like, oh yeah, that kid was bullied in school with this word, so it must be a bad thing.
Absolutely, definitely in primary school. Aside from that, like the word gay is just thrown around. I don't think any like child is capable of being homophobic, really. I don't think so. I don't think they understand it. But the word gay is just thrown out. I remember being called gay in year 5, and I was a bit like, I knew what gay was just about, and I was a bit like, that sounds like he means it in a bad way. Oh no, oh dear. And it's just like that really deep early on stuff. If you're like, okay, so gay means bad. Okay, got you.
It's especially silly in English because it means happy. Like, I just don't understand.
Queer's the same thing. Like you hear in like some fucking book that you've been made to read this from like 1860, and you're like, they were walking queerly and gaily around the field. You're like, I want to be in that field. That sounds like a great time.
That is such a queer is the perfect example because queer was such a negative word that has been reclaimed, and I think it's such a positive word. We are literally having a conversation called the Queer Confab right now. And like certainly when I was a kid, queer was still a bad word. So yeah. Can we just do that? Can we just do that to like labels, please? That would be great.
Yeah, reclaim them.
Yeah. But people have a problem, even now have a problem with the word queer in terms of like, oh, it's like an insult. You shouldn't use it to describe yourself. People who are part of like the LGBTQ, etc. community don't like that word. And that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's like the interpretations of the label.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That was the interpretations of labels was kind of something Tom and I were discussing beforehand about a subject that I don't want to go into too deeply, but the whole cisgendered topic that's been going on as well. Like, is it bad to be referred to as cisgendered or that kind of thing? So that's interesting that you brought it up, but we're not going to go into it just now. I just wanted to make that point. Anything else that you guys want to talk about in that?
Just for context, we're not going into it because we don't want to, but just because we're talking about it next week.
Okay, fair. It's like, let's not rap tunes in one.
Yeah,
Like,
It's a teaser. It's a
It
teaser.
will be discussed.
amazing. I'll tune in.
Yeah, feel free.
Oh,
Feel free. And sound off in the comments as well, like your opinion on it. Like, absolutely, that's what we want to hear. So everyone's good on that kind of topic. We all good, all got our outs. Perfect. Another little personal one. I want to know if any of your labels has either given you a positive or negative experience. You know, if there's a label that you have and because of that, it's led to a negative discriminatory experience, or it's been absolutely fantastic for you because it's finally, that is who I am. And I know anything you kind of want to share. You can do one of each if you fancy. It's totally fine.
I feel like the way, which is what Sammy's just said, and about the word queer, is that I think we all process words in a different way. And I mean, certainly for me, I would never say that anyone has been particularly homophobic to me. But in hindsight, I've probably had experiences where people have been homophobic to me. I've just chosen not to understand it in that way. Like I think of one really specific example when there was someone at high school that was like, you big gay. And I was like, hey, you're bigger than me, but I'm gayer than you. And I don't know, just for me, I was like, yes, I'm gay, I am, and you're big. Great, those are two facts of life. Let's move on.
Well done, you're educated.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm not saying that there aren't much harsher and much meaner things that have been said. I'm not saying homophobia doesn't exist or transphobia or whatever, because it certainly does. But I think, yeah, you can choose to make what you will of smaller situations like that. So I wouldn't say I've had a bad experience with a label particularly.
Yeah, I it's also like tricky because I only found my label very, very recently. But it's just the fact of like gendered language in general. So I know people don't mean it as a bad thing. It was funny, we went to a restaurant yesterday, and the waiter was like wearing a rainbow lanyard, that's the word, and so it's clearly like, oh hey, pride, but still referred to us all as hey ladies. So like, okay, yeah, like I understand part of it, but I don't understand everything, and I'm not inclusive in all the sense. So like I definitely experience a lot of that, but I'm like, I'm a bit more forgiving because I understand it's not the individual, it's society, and people assume gender all the time. And because I'm not like carrying a badge that says my pronouns, so I'm like, okay, I get it. You know, I look like a woman to you, so, you know, I'll let it slide. But it does, you know, obviously bug me, but mainly because it bugs me that society is like that. Not because I feel like they're attacking me personally.
And if someone gets it wrong, how would you like them to approach it, as from more of an understanding point of view? How would you then like someone to approach it, like, you know, fixing that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a tricky one also because like I go by they, she. Even if someone calls me he, I don't mind. But like those are like, and I used to be she. I used to be she, they. But then I realized that I like that I like they more, or at least currently it feels more grounded within me. So then it's kind of tricky if someone calls me she and I can't be like, well, actually my pronouns are they, she, so you've just used she, which is one of my pronouns. So it depends. Like I did have like conversations with my friends who'd known me before I found my identity. So I just said to them like, oh, okay, actually, you know, when you say girl, it doesn't really ring true with me anymore. So if you can refrain from that, that'd be great. But like the assuming gender happens mostly from strangers. So then I'm not going to be like, actually, do you know what? No, this is the situation with me. And yeah, so in those cases, I wouldn't correct them. But for example, like at work, if someone would refer to me in front of the customers as she, I would say to them later on, can you please refer to me as they in front of them? Because I'd rather strangers talk to me as they and not assume. So yeah, in those cases, but I wouldn't go talk to a stranger about my gender identity.
No, wonderful. Thank you.
That's
Sammy,
okay.
any of your experiences you want to share?
Um, I've been lucky enough never to have like an overtly homophobic or biphobic attack or whatever. But I think maybe that's because I'm slightly more, not reserved about it. I'm maybe just a bit more selective, mostly because I just don't think it's many people's business apart from my own. Not that I think you shouldn't be out loud and proud, and if that's where you want to be, amazing. For me, it's just, I don't know. I'm just very like, oh, I trust you. I feel confident around you. You get to see this part of me. But I think there were certainly things, like I said earlier, it's been more of a slow journey. And I think maybe in hindsight, something that held it back is that I was in a Sunday league football team for like 5 years, and I stuck out on that thing like a sore thumb. And I was a bit like, why don't I get along with the boys? I'm a boy, I'm playing football. And I couldn't quite figure out why. And then the team was going to dissolve and form a new team when I was like 16, boring sidebar. And I was like, oh, but they're going to form again under a different name. Do you want to join? And I was just like, and I just knew, no, I can't go back to that space. And it was from then. So maybe when I was late 16, I was being like very much like, there's something up here. Not up in a bad way, but just like, no, there's more here that you need to figure out. And that's a thing that I think I've experienced. I think I put myself in a lot of, I am a part of a lot of places that do have a lot of problems with homophobia, or like being a fan of football. Like I love football, but it's just like an awful thing to not be a straight white dude in. So that was probably something that was quite hard. I went to a football game once by myself, and I would never go again because it's just terrifying. You just feel like everyone's watching you. And I'm not a particularly overtly effeminate person. I'm not particularly a masculine person either. I'm just kind of this blob of semi-androgyny. But then in like,
I think they're more
I love that.
That should be your Twitter bio.
blob of semi-androgyny. I've only got one follower. I don't think it's worth it for Twitter. Maybe on Instagram. But then an empowering experience I had was maybe like 2 weeks ago. I went to go see this band, who are this really loud, really abrasive punk band. So something that's particularly a more masculine environment. But the lyricist sings about like being on Grindr and stuff. And he comes out and he's just like the most effeminate, like wonderful human you've ever seen. And then he just starts screaming. I was like, oh, this is how I feel represented. Like there are people like me in these spaces. It's just not as, I don't know, it's just not as considered to be, oh, that's how like a queer man is or a queer person is. If you're queer, you like, like I said earlier, I'll do it again for Tom, the boom shit a cat. You like all that stuff. So yeah, but that was a very empowering experience, and I was very like, oh, feel seen. That's fun. Yeah, I rambled vaguely towards a point there. It's fun.
No, you're totally fine. It was great. It was fantastic. Wonderful. I'm really glad to hear all your experiences. It's a way of reminding everyone, we're all human. We all go through things. We all have our different experiences, but we all have shared ones too. So just to kind of round off on a final question, if you may, we've discussed, the highs and lows of labels, if they're empowering, if they're limiting. Would an ideal world be one without? One where it doesn't matter what labels you are, one where we don't care, you're just who you are, or do we need them in order to have an understanding? Anyone jump in, feel free.
An ideal world, they would exist, but they wouldn't be necessary. They would be there if you wanted them, but you could also, you could just not have one, and that's fine. Or you could, there but not necessary.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, I agree. But also, in a way, like if you then again extend labels to like, you can identify yourself as like, I'm a singer or I'm an outdoorsy person. So it's just a way to like define yourself. So yes, you can know it. But if you want to, you don't have to if you don't want to. If you want to talk about it to someone else, if there's no label or no word for it, I think maybe the label is then the wrong word. If there's a word for things, then that's great. But if it's a label, it sounds more fixed. So yes. So I don't know if that made any sense.
It
Fine.
totally did. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Labels are this is literally how we started, but like my opinion hasn't changed on it. I think it's helpful and also absolutely terrible. And I think it's maybe just how we continue to perceive labels and what we do with that information that perhaps is what should change. Yeah, I feel like sticky labels or like pin badges are good, ones that aren't there forever, because then you know, oh wow, I got really metaphorical, I'm sorry, but where you can take them off and put them on as you will and please, and people are like, oh wow, you've got a pin today. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you so much. Just the last thing, we've all been through our own queer journeys throughout our lives. Is there any advice you would like to give to the people watching who are struggling with either their gender identities or their sexuality?
Yes.
Go.
Talk to people, talk to them. It sounds big and scary, but talk to someone. The entire reason that we do things like we're doing right now is because we want other people to do these. We want the world to have a queer confab. And even though it's Car Crash, we've got a bunch of what's the one I heard on TikTok? LGBTQ, people, LGBTQ. It just talk to literally anyone, to someone, talk to a pal. And even though that feels like a really hard step sometimes, it's so helpful because one opinion and is often better than just the one that's in your head.
Yeah. I would add to that, yeah, definitely talk to people. Talk to yourself as well. I don't know, very, philosophical. And also, like, I find that, like, social media can be many a bad thing, but it is also very useful because there's so much more content there for you to just grasp. So, if you know at least one word or something, to go to a tag, or maybe you've heard of a queer content creator, just like look at their stuff, see if it fits. And yeah, maybe you'll find a community or something might click.
That's a really good point about queer content creators, because you're so much more in control of that because it's private. You can just do it in your bedroom. You can be like, right, I'm just gonna watch this 10-minute video, and that might be enough for today. That might be too much for today, but that's like a point of how it can start. I would also just say you're going to be okay. Like, things will be fine. Like, you'll be okay, and there's no time limit. You shouldn't have to figure it out by like the time you're 18 or in 6 months. Just make it up as you go along and it'll be fine. And talk to people. Your friends will care a lot more than you think they will, and will support you a lot more than you think you will. And if they don't, then they're not a good friend anyway. So just, fucking cut them off. So,
And they might also,
you shouldn't have to.
no, yeah, you can say I cut you off. I was just gonna say on the friends thing,
No,
like
I'm ready for this.
Like, your friends might also be able to help you. Like, they might know.
Yeah.
I got many of friends saying like, yeah, I had a feeling, but I didn't know how to put words into it because you didn't. But like, or even my mum was like, oh yeah, I knew, but I just didn't want to talk to you about it because I wasn't sure if you knew or if you just didn't want to. So yeah, so if you talk to your friends, they might.
Or your friend might be going through the same thing, and then you talk to them about it and they're like, shit, me too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Just before we finish off, I'm going to quickly hand over to Tom, who's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening next week, a little thing called Queer Cabaret, which I know a little someone may be starring into.
Oh,
I bought my ticket.
To introduce that for everyone.
Thank you, Zoe. Yay. Okay, cool. Next week, Car Crash are putting on the Queer Cabaret. Woo! Yeah, I can hear you cheer through the screen. Yeah, 2 years ago, we did the Queer Cabaret for the first time as part of Car Crash's yearly schedule of stuff, and it was really fantastic. It was this beautiful sellout evening of queer joy. And that's exactly what we're doing this year with an even bigger lineup. And this year it's in aid of the absolutely fantastic charity Mermaids, who work with gender diverse young people and their families to help them process life and the understanding of all of that. So please get your tickets. They're on the Bread and Roses Theatre website, and you can see the beautiful Naya perform, which would be great. Yeah, so that's all my piece. Thank you, Zoe.
Not a problem at all. Next week on Queer Confab, we will be speaking about trans rights. So we hope to see you joining us there. Thank you again so much to all my guests and to all the viewers for watching today. It's been fantastic hosting one of these, and also terrifying. I've been shaking the entire time, but it's fine.
You did great. You did great.
Amazing.
See you next week. Bye.